As y'all know, I've been doing a series here on the podcast of interviews meant to help aspiring expats, future immigrants explore ways that they can support themselves while living abroad. And in that vein, I reached out to Karissa, who has lived and worked in Malaysia, Cuba, Japan, and Ireland in hopes that she would share her story. Well, instead of just sharing her story, she proposed a conversation with a group of friends that she has that all worked abroad as well. And I was like, okay, fine, the more the merrier. And what I got was, uh, this incredible story of a tight knit tribe of Black women who found each other working in, of all places, Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and ended up creating a sisterhood that has spanned countries all over the globe. And you'll get to hear that conversation in a second. But their relationship got me really to think about the nature of community. And when I say community, I'm talking about, those people in your life, you have their back the same way that they have yours, okay? And I'll speak from my personal experience. I am the youngest of three, but I was basically raised as an only child. And on top of that, I'm an introvert who doesn't trust people or depend on other people. So I can't say that I've really had much sense of community for most of my life. So I think that's what really intrigued me by hearing them talk. But what I do know now that I didn't know before is that having community is vital. Community also is not limited to the people who are physically where you are, as these ladies definitely prove. Their sistership strengthened over thousands of miles across different continents, and that speaks to the value and the importance of community. As Black women, we have a lot stacked against us, from white supremacy, structural racism, misogynoir, medical bias, the list goes on. And when you look at it, we really only have each other. Okay. This is true for those of us that live abroad, but this is also true if you live in the US. I know I sure as hell did not expect to find community when I moved out of the United States 4 years ago, but that's exactly what happened. Like I now have in my life some incredible Black women who I just never imagined I would meet. Maybe it's living this life that I do now unencumbered by so much of what it is to be a Black woman in the US. Maybe I was able to more easily connect with other people and form these relationships, or maybe it was just sheer luck. I don't know, but I am thankful for those women that I have gotten to know. And I'm excited for y'all to hear this conversation. Welcome to the Picky Girl Travels podcast. I'm Adelia Borashade. Okay, so today I've got a group of ladies who have all lived abroad in various places that, we wanted to talk to and kind of get their um, perception and experiences on life abroad. We've got Latrice, Ashley, Desiree, Ebony, Karissa, and Roshuanda. Thank you, ladies, for joining me today. I kind of was a little stuck at like where do we start this, because your experiences are all a little different. You all lived abroad at some point in um, your career, but the path you took to get there was all a little bit different. So I guess if
I guess the first thing I want to know is, um, when when did you decide, like, oh yeah, I'm going to move abroad? Like, was that something you always wanted to do? Was that something you just kind of fell into? You know, how did that go?
This is Latrice. I can go first. I always wanted to travel. I didn't necessarily have an idea to live abroad, but I always wanted to see the world. It always kind of felt like one of those things that, um, like you always want to do it, but you don't really know if it's ever actually going to happen. Like the probability that you'll actually get to do that is slim. I mean, I'm from Louisiana, I'm from New Orleans, and I've seen other people go to Europe and things like that, and it just always seemed like this really foreign idea. But my father was in the military before I was born, way before I was born. And I grew up listening to him and my mom tell stories about the time that they lived in Germany when they first got married. By the time I came along, my dad was already medically discharged. So the military was never a part of my life outside of like the VA or something like that. But I just always remembered listening to their stories about living in Germany, and I always wanted to travel. So I'm a therapist by trade, and I ended up getting a job doing military counseling, specifically because of the opportunity to travel. In the first 2 years or so, I didn't really do much traveling outside of the United States, but I did a lot of traveling within the United States. And then finally, an opportunity presented itself for me to take an international assignment. And I chose to go to Cuba. I was going to go to Alaska, but then I realized it was way too cold in Alaska and I wasn't going to do that. So I ended up going to Cuba, which is where I met all of these ladies and I met my husband as well, like within 2 weeks of each other. So going to Cuba, which was the first time that I ever left the country ever in my life, really ended up being a massive turning point in my life. Where I met my lifelong friends, I met my husband, and I made some other connections and things that I'm going to keep for a while as well. From there, I just kept traveling. After that, I just did exclusively international assignments. From there, I'm no longer doing that. I'm in South Florida now, working and living with my husband, and trying to build and things like that. But my journey to living abroad, it started with just wanting to see the world, and it has really garnered so much more for me.
So this is Karissa. So for me, like Latrice, my dad was in the military, but he did not retire until I was already in college. So I always grew up moving around all over the states and then all over the world. So for me, it was just like a natural transition to just keep going and keep living abroad. So now I'm in Colorado Springs, but I have been living abroad for the past 10 years.
All right, this is Desiree. So my journey, I guess, started as a kid too. My dad was in the military. I was born and grew up in Germany. Left about when I turned 10. But how I got there as an adult, it was just like a transition into a new life. I was recently divorced. I applied for an internship. I didn't get it. I kept getting emails saying you can reapply. Today's the last day, blah, blah, blah. So I just reapplied on the last day. A few months later, I got an email saying I got picked and they were sending me to Germany. And I was like, all right. So I went to Germany. After that, same thing, getting emails saying this job is available, that job's available. And I ended up in Gitmo. So, yep. And after Gitmo, I went to Japan. Now I'm in Italy. So mine was just kind of serendipitous, I guess.
So this is Ebony. I kind of, for my journey to just traveling over abroad, it was just an opportunity for me to, um, I'm from North Carolina. I've always been a person that has been outgoing, outspoken, and it was an opportunity for me to leave North Carolina, really get the opportunity to see what's out there. So my first place I traveled to was actually Guantanamo Bay as an intern with MWR at first, doing special events. And then a year later, after I graduated college, I actually ended up getting a full-time job in Guantanamo Bay, working at lodging there. And then I ended up staying in Guantanamo Bay for 7 years. And during that 7 years, the ladies that are on this call has made that time amazing. I mean, being in Gitmo with these ladies has really transformed my life, had a definite impact on me as an adult. And I am thankful to, have them and have met them and continue on with the relationship that I have with them.
So this is Roshuanda speaking. I'm originally from California. I don't have stories like them. My father was not in the military or mother, but my first traveling experience was Guantanamo Bay. So I got on with the internship there, and I stayed there for 2 years, and that's where I met these lovely ladies. I mean, I threw Ebony her baby shower, Desiree her bridal shower. So yeah, we have a tough connection. From Guantanamo Bay, I left and I went to Kwajalein Atoll. I was there for a year and then went to the States for like a year or so. And then now I'm in Sicily, Italy. And believe it or not, me and Desiree are here together. So small world, small circle.
And last but not least, me, Ashley. Well, my first experience abroad was when I was in 7th grade. I went to England. And after tasting the pizza, falling in love with the mattresses there, you hit it and you go right to sleep. I decided that I wanted to do this for a lifetime. So I joined the Navy at 18. And my first duty station was Okinawa, Japan. Stayed there for 2 years. And then I went to, I think it was California for school, then Maryland. Then I got picked to go to Guantanamo Bay. And in Guantanamo Bay, I had my 18-month-old daughter, and I was newly divorced. And I think I met Desiree first through a mutual friend. And from meeting Desiree, I met Roshuanda. And then the list just continues on to everybody that's on this podcast right now. And I must say, without them being in Gitmo would have been horrible. But they've taught me so much when it comes down to being a woman, when it comes down to being au natural, whatever it is, and also being a parent. Because most of these ladies here have worked with kids, still work with kids, and that's their career is with children.
And this is Desiree again, and I would like to point out too, yes, me and Roshuanda are together, but since we've all have left Gitmo, we have all gotten together in some point in time, and it's truly been a blessing. I got to see Karissa in Japan. Latrice came to see me in Japan, and we saw each other. Ebony and I saw each other in Jamaica. Latrice and Ebony came to San Diego to see me, and of course, me and Roshuanda are together. Ashley came to North Carolina to see me. So this is a lifelong sistership. I'm not going to say friendship.
I do want to dig into the relationship that you ladies have created, but before I do that, I can't bypass, like, for some of you, your first experience abroad was Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. When people think about, like, oh yeah, I'm going to move abroad, Cuba is generally not on the list, and I'm like incredibly curious about what that was like, especially those of you who have lived other places abroad outside of Gitmo. Like, how did that experience compare to other places that we typically think about when we think about living abroad?
This is Latrice. I'll kind of answer that question from my perspective. I always tell people, when you tell people that you lived in Cuba and they're like, oh wow, Cuba, and I'm like, no girl, no, it's not regular Cuba. This is Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. That's a whole different type of Cuba. The gates are closed still, even with all of the back and forth that was going on with letting people into Cuba and visiting and stuff like that, the gates never opened for Guantanamo Bay. And so Gitmo is a very, very weird and interesting little place because it operates like its own little island. You have no contact with the rest of the country of Cuba, but you're not really in America either. But it is America, but it's not. Like, it's weird. It's a really, weird place to be in. Once you get there, you're there. You can take a flight on and off, but those flights are not, it's not like you can just buy a book a flight and then get on a flight and go. It only goes to like 3 destinations, and that's if the plane doesn't break down. Like, it's an ordeal trying to get on and off the island. So you end up spending a lot of time on island, and making connections and making relationships with people is paramount in terms of being able to just last there. The job that I had, it was a lot of isolation. Typically, when we go to other places around the world, like when I was in Japan, when I was in Germany, they really don't encourage us to interact with the people on the base, whether it's the other employees, the staff, and the workers at the facilities, or the military personnel or spouses, because they want us to be able to remain impartial. With the Cuba assignment, it's kind of this unspoken kind of agreement that they have with us, where if you're on the Cuba assignment, they just turn a blind eye to interactions that you have with other people, because they know, because the island is so isolated, you cannot further isolate yourself. You will not make it. You will be miserable. So I enjoyed being in Cuba, especially that first time. I think because I like almost immediately made connections. I met my husband the first day I was there. I actually met Ebony before I met everybody else. I met Ebony on my first date with my husband. She came up to me and was like, "Hey, aren't you the new counselor?" And so, Cuba is a really weird and interesting little place, but it's a good opportunity to make strong connections. I think that's why our connection is as strong as it is, because we had to rely on each other, because there's literally like nowhere else to go. Like, all you can do is spend time with the people that you're spending time with.
This is Karissa, and I'm just going to agree with everything that Latrice said. So most of our experience has been overseas working with military populations, but for me, I transitioned from a non-military environment. I was in Ireland, and then I went to Cuba, and it was just like all military. You can't go anywhere, and there's very limited things to do actually on the base. But like Latrice said, without your relationships, you're not going to make it. And if you don't have a strong support system, if you don't make connections, you're not going to make it over there. So it was a really unique opportunity. I think all of us gained a lot from that experience. And
I can agree to that. Throughout the 7 years I was there, Latrice came down twice, and I had another one of my friends actually come down, and she had got a job there. So without a good support system, the Gitmo life is really, really difficult. And when I say that these ladies allowed me to look forward to, our Thirsty Thursdays together, our Friday outings together, even our weekend Sunday gatherings, like we would eat dinner together, family style, with the spouses, with the kids, with each other. If not every Sunday, it was every other Sunday. When I tell you it was a Thanksgiving spread every single Sunday, I mean, those are moments and times that really allowed for us to strengthen our relationship, to be these sisters that we are today. And I am so thankful for those times, because when I didn't get my Thanksgiving Sundays, it was rough. But, these girls are my true family. So, yes, they made Gitmo feel like home.
I would like to agree with what everyone was saying. Being in the military, especially being a single parent, Black woman, whatever you want to have it, it's tough. because in the States, everybody is so scattered and everybody gets on with their own life. So you look forward to going overseas. So you go overseas and you make friends, and hopefully you make the right friends that are going to be there for you while you're there. And then you make better friends that are going to be there for you for the rest of your life. And the fact that Cuba is a jail to a point, and you can't leave the base willy-nilly like you would do in the States. You had to depend on other people, and especially me, because I had a child. You had to depend on good people. And when I found that, and then it was like, we can't let this go, regardless of how much we fuss, we cuss, we discuss anything. We're all good friends, and I'm very thankful to have that. So you need friends, period, but you definitely need it over there in that type of environment.
I think y'all's experience in Cuba very much speaks to the need for community. One of the things that I often see asked about in various like expat groups I'm in, or when people are inquiring about living abroad, they talk about, or I also see people who have moved abroad and, like they find themselves being lonely, or they find themselves without community. I think it's incredible that you ladies were able to all find each other when and where you did, and it's especially important given the nature of the location you were in, being on Guantanamo Bay. I can imagine is a very difficult place to be, if you don't have that community. Have you been able to make, I know the answer to this kind of, like when you moved other places, have you had similar communities, or, was this what y'all developed that was just really something special?
So this is Desiree. I'll answer that question, and the answer is absolutely not. So most of us on the call have, we found love in Cuba. We all married foreign nationals, Jamaicans. And so when I went to Japan after Cuba, I felt bad for moving my husband, across the world. He didn't know anybody. I didn't know anybody either, but I felt obligated to make him comfortable. So I tried to find a Caribbean community. I tried to find, Jamaican people, Caribbean, Trinidad, anybody from the Caribbean that he could speak his language, that he can eat his food, that he could listen to his music, just tried to accommodate him. So therefore I kind of put myself on the back burner, and I didn't really make friends like I did when I was in Cuba. Karissa was there. I had some coworkers, but I never have found that relationship again. And sadly, I don't think I ever will. Because like she said, like they all said, Gitmo was such a unique place, and we spent so much time together and learned so much about each other that I don't think I want to put that much effort into meeting and learning someone new.
That's an honest answer.
I would have to agree with Desiree. From Guantanamo Bay, I went to an even smaller base that like no one has ever heard of before, but it was just not the same. My experience of trying to meet people and connect with people, like there weren't too many people around my age range or even people that I could connect with. So that made my tour there very short because I just couldn't make the connections.
Yeah, this is Latrice. I'll just add, from my perspective, I wasn't ever able to like make a connection with a group of people the way that I made the connection with this particular group of people. But I did make other connections, with other people who were also doing the military counseling, working with the same program that I was working. When I went to Japan specifically, there was a really big population of Black expats in Okinawa, which I was very surprised to see. And it was all different types of people. We had teachers, we had school counselors, we had adult counselors. There were, of course, military service members, spouses. Like it was very, very diverse, and it was really robust. And so it was nice to kind of see that, but I still had that obligation to create some separation. I was able to make some connections though with people that like on an individual basis, like people that I know are going to be in my life probably for the rest of my life. But in terms of it's not the same type of connection. It's more like, hey girl, how you doing, girl? Happy Thanksgiving, girl. You look good, girl. But with this group, you know, we talk like we have a freaking book club that we're doing. We did our own versus battle. Like we actually talk and communicate with each other frequently. But like I think I talk to y'all more than I talk to my mom, which I feel like I should be embarrassed to say that, but I'm not, you know, because you have different relationships that, you know, mean different things to you. So, yes, I've made other connections, and strong connections, but not the same type of connection that we have.
This is Ashley speaking. I would have to agree with everybody. I've tried to make other connections, and you kind of a little bit of being in the military, you try and make things happen, but everybody's not as open to being as vulnerable as we are with each other. We share secrets, and there are some things that I've told these ladies I probably would never tell my mom. I might not ever tell my husband, you know, and it's because we are there with each other, and everybody has their own level of vulnerability, what we share, and I can respect that. And a lot of people in the world, a lot of people in the States, a lot of people in other countries aren't willing to do that because you have a lot of backstabbers. You can't really trust any and everyone that you tell your business to keep your interest if that's their heart. So where we've tried to make connections, I mean, I have friends, I have game nights here in Connecticut, but it's kind of like, I still talk to these ladies about everything. We still fuss and discuss about, like I said, the book club, still the music, and it comes down to food, comes down to raising children, being nice to our spouses, and being everything we need to be for them, and all of that. But making these connections is pretty hard, but what we have is.
Yeah, I haven't. Sorry, this is Ebony. I have not really made too many connections. I have a 6-year-old son, and I really honestly haven't found friends that, you know, I trust to take my child around or to be around on a consistent basis with him. But these ladies, you know, it was, you know, they would take my child, you know, we take each other kids, we were babysitting each other's kids, we were and had, you know, family time and family functions together. Kids were comfortable, we were comfortable, and I haven't really made those connections with other people. I can say I have associates. I might call them on the holiday, but um, not too many connections.
I will also add that I really didn't develop a community of Black women until I moved abroad. You know, like I knew the occasional Black woman, but it's the relationships that I formed in the places that I lived abroad. Like those are the ladies who, you know, it's nothing like y'all got, but those are, I've met some really incredible Black women living abroad, and that's been a really great thing. Um, okay, I am curious. Somebody can tell me about the versus battle y'all had?
Therese, I'm gonna let you go ahead and handle that, ma'am.
Yeah, so we did our own versus battle, and so I think we were watching the one with Teddy Riley and Babyface, and we were on a group chat while we were watching. We're actually on a group chat now, talking behind the scenes, you know, just amening each other and stuff like that. We are always on a group chat. And so we were watching this versus battle together, and all of the issues that they had and everything like that. And I think Desiree was like, we could have our own versus battle. And everybody was just like, yeah, let's do that. And we,
Let me interject. It was Roshuanda. Sorry.
what you say?
It was
Well, I
Roshuanda.
never.
Oh,
Hey, honey.
it was Roshanda's recommendation. I apologize, Ro. It
Petty
was
Betty.
Roshanda's
Petty Betty.
recommendation, and we made it happen. And it was so exciting, to the point where I do live streams. I have a Facebook group, and I have a podcast and things like that, and I do live streams. I had started a live stream just randomly about 20 minutes before our versus battle. And I got the notification on my phone that it was time for the battle, and they started calling and everything. And on my live stream, I was like, we're going to have to wrap this up because we got a versus battle going on with my friends and I'm not missing this. So we need to make it happen. So we did our own versus battle. Everybody came up with like 5 or 6 different songs that we wanted to play. And it was really, obviously we're not musicians. So we just did our like songs that we enjoy, songs that we love, and just kind of had a nostalgic moment. And I think our versus battle lasted like 4 hours, something like that. So we do things like that just to like maintain connection with each other, because it's important. Like we genuinely enjoy each other's company. When we were in Cuba, we spent a lot of time, like every Sunday, like Ebony was saying, I believe, we did a Sunday dinner. We would have game nights. Like we genuinely enjoy spending time with each other and enjoying each other's company. And so it's really just been about, now that we're literally scattered all over the world, it's really been about finding ways to maintain those connections and still be able to enjoy each other in the ways that we originally did.
And I think that underscores that community is bigger than just the people who are where you live. It's a much bigger thing than that. When women talk about moving abroad and that's finding love, y'all gotta share, because my personal experience has not been great. But then again, I wasn't, like nobody was checking for me in the United States. And so that really hasn't changed since I moved abroad. I've lived in Honduras, Mexico, China, and Kuwait. So I'm absolutely 100% sure that there are ladies in the audience that they want to know everything y'all are willing to tell them about that.
I think Desiree might be the best person to talk because I feel like for me, she's like my dating a foreign national fairy godmother.
Oh God, I'm over here cracking up because I would say for all of us, me, Ashley, and Latrice, well, all of us actually, I don't think we were actually looking for love, but it just kind of happened. My story is kind of similar to Tree's. I got to Gitmo on a Saturday. Sunday, a girlfriend of mine took me to church, and this guy went up to the altar, and I was like, in the name of Jesus, hey now. But, I was like, I'm in church, Jesus Lord. And I thought he was cute. I didn't say nothing to him then. But the next week I saw him and I was like, oh, that's the guy from church. I got all excited, blah, 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 blah. He asked me if I wanted to have a drink. And 8 years later, we're still together. So it just kind of happened. So with Latrice and Ashley and Roshuanda, I couldn't tell Ebony because Ebony already knew before me. When they started talking and dilly-dallying with their Jamaicans, I was like, rule number 1, do not let them cook for you, because once they cook for you, it's over. Rule number 2, do not sleep with them, because once you sleep with them, it's over. Sadly, neither one of them listened. Sorry, moms, if you're listening. And and what is it? 4 years later for Trees, and I want to say 3 years later for Ashley. They're still together, happily married. So it just kind of happened. I really wasn't, like I said before, I was divorced. I was not checking for him. TMI for $1,000. I bought my toys. I bought my George Foreman. I was not looking for no one. I had my one little cup, my little bowl, my little spoon. I was fine by myself. And I guess God just saw fit to put this man in my life. And like I said, it just happened like that. And we've been together. And I can say, annoyingly, happy 8 years later.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback off of what Desiree was saying, in terms of like giving tips and advice for anybody who is looking for love or like who is interested in it, I think it's so important, especially for Black women, that we entertain the idea of dating other cultures, dating within other cultures. All of us were able to find some type of relationship, whether those relationships worked out long-term or not. We were able to find some level of happiness, at least for a temporary period by dating somebody outside of our culture. Yeah, I think in America, we have such a stigma around dating people like non-Americans or dating people from other cultures because the first thing that people assume is that they're trying to get a green card. But the reality is that not everybody wants to live in America. Not everybody wants to be American. Some people really love their country, even if their country is not as advanced as America is. Sometimes you just make a connection with somebody. And so for me, my husband, he's the first non-American that I've ever dated. And, this is what it turned out to be. We've been together for 5 years, married 4 years in September. And, I'm the happiest that I've ever been. So I would definitely recommend, like, if you travel abroad, if you live abroad, getting to know some of the locals and, really becoming a part of the local community and interacting with the foreign nationals. You never know, you might be able to find love. And then the other thing, based on my own experience, is, dating outside of a particular age bracket. My husband is 12 years younger than I am, which when I first met him, I was not checking for him at all. I felt very much like how Stella got her groove back and robbing the cradle and all of that. And I just really wasn't giving him the time of day. But over time, what I realized is that when I'm with him, I don't feel that age difference. It just feels like me and him. And I like the way I feel when I'm with him. And so I had to give myself permission to just be happy with somebody that made me happy and not focus so much on the age difference. And so that would be my other recommendation, is just to think outside of the box in terms of, dating somebody from a specific background or somebody who meets a certain, like they have to be in a certain age category or something like that, because you never really know when you're able to make a connection with somebody.
This is Karissa. So my friends, these other ladies, they have been involved with Jamaican men. But for me, I actually met a French man. So my son's father is French, and I met him in Japan. So like they said, you just have to be open to the possibilities. Just be open to talking to people that you may never have been able to interact with before if you weren't in that specific place at that specific time. So just be open.
In addition to being open, this is Ashley speaking, I would have to say, know what you want and know the foundation of what you want. Like, for instance, if you understand that you want someone that's going to love you and your children, that's going to treat you like you should be treated, not what you think you should be treated as, but what you should be. Because my husband has shown me, I may have this idea of myself. He's always gone above and beyond that to show me, like, man, God really does have a special love for us versus what we can see or what we even think is even possible on earth. And they're just different. Like, I mean, we could sit here and write a book about what it is to date and marry a Jamaican man or anybody from any culture, because it's a lot of adjustments that you will have to make. But I think when you take into consideration the adjustments that you make for the men in the States, and some of them garbage, we're willing to make a couple of adjustments for someone that's really truly maybe a diamond in the rough, or maybe something that you didn't think you needed, but you really did.
I think several of you hit on that, like having to let go of what we've been told we're supposed to want, what we've been told, our expectations should be, just kind of sort of disregarding that and just taking on these new opportunities, new interactions, and just, being open and seeing where they will go. I think that's big.
And one thing we have to point out too, this is Desiree, sorry, dating someone outside of your culture is very different because they're different from American men. I can say for myself, my husband's older than I, but he's from, I guess, a different generation. But he's, in tune to my hair, my clothes, my this, my that. And I wasn't used to American men being that invested or interested. So sometimes I be butthurt because I'm like, why would he say that to me? But to him, he's like trying to make me better or compliment me. But as an American, I'm taking offense to it because I'm not used to a man caring that much. So sometimes you have to take a step back from your Americanism to understand that, you know, other cultures are not, I guess, anti-American or not hating on you, but I guess you just think you're better because you are American, if that makes sense.
Sometimes we just have to get over ourselves a little bit, you know.
Right.
I always say I didn't realize, being African American, you grow up, not really necessarily feeling fully American, if that makes sense. Like being Black in America is a completely different experience. And so it's like, yes, you're American, but you're Black. And so that's like a separate thing. But when you're dating somebody who's not American at all, like it really makes you realize just how American you really are. I think that one of the first arguments that me and my husband ever had when we first started dating was because he told me that like I was born with a gold spoon in my mouth. And I was like, no, I did not. Like we struggled, we wasn't living in the hood or nothing like that. But there were times that we came home and the lights were turned off, or like we had to eat, beans and weenies and stuff like that. Like we wasn't balling like, people think. But from his perspective, we had a washer and dryer in our home. And even though that washer and dryer didn't work all the time, the fact that we didn't have to, like, he grew up walking to the river, which was like a mile and something away, to wash clothes in the river. So because we had a washer and dryer in our home, to him, we lived a life of luxury. And so that was, it was really like a reality check for me to kind of like, yeah, I'm extra, extra American. Like I didn't realize just how American I was until I started dating a non-American. And so, like Desiree was saying, just kind of putting things into perspective and understanding that you do come from two different backgrounds and you both have to be on the same page in terms of finding what your new culture is together. And that means that you have to be open to their culture and they have to be open to yours. And then you just find what works for you, for your relationship.
I think you hit the nail on the head, because being a Black American, it's not something that, like, those of you who married or dated Jamaicans, like, they're Black, but they're not Black American. And so their experience is different. And I know myself, I don't feel fully American. And it's like you said, it's not until you're around people who are not Americans that you realize, like, oh yeah, I am a lot more American than I thought.
And even being surrounded by non-Americans, like we live in South Florida. My husband and I live in Broward County, which it has a really large Cuban population, but Caribbean population. So a lot of Jamaicans, a lot of Haitians, Bahamians, like it's a huge Caribbean population out here. And so I often find myself the only like straight up American in the room, often. And so that at first was a little intimidating, not super intimidating because I'm from New Orleans, which is like its own country too, So I can kind of hold my own, but just getting used to being in that space, like being surrounded by the Caribbean and all of these different cultures and learning all of these different cultures. And you have so many different languages and innuendos and things like that that's going on around you, just finding yourself not being the only Black person for once, but still feeling slightly isolated because you're the only American, which still puts you in a different type of category. But I find that just being open to learning about those cultures, and I'm getting better with speaking and understanding patois. I'm picking up some, the Haitian Creole stuff so that I can integrate myself and just open myself up to these different cultures, because it really it only makes me better,
Now, you all in this group, you met in Guantanamo, but some of you were enlisted, some of you were civilians. How was your experience different or how was your experience different from one another because of how you arrived there or why you were there?
It's Ashley here. I was thinking as she was answering the question, like, how would I answer that? Well, I came in to Gitmo with the understanding, okay, I'm in the military. I work different hours. I can't really say how it was different, except we had to wear a uniform. We had different work.
And it's quite possible that it wasn't. Like you said, you had different work, so it may very well have been, and again, I'm asking this as somebody who doesn't really have experience here. It sounds like what y'all are saying is that it was just very much like everybody, it's like the same as you would be in an expat community somewhere else where people just have different kinds of jobs. That's what I'm hearing.
I would have to agree from that, considering maybe 3 of us is from the same state. So it's kind of like we were a little bit the same. Everybody had similar, I wouldn't say similar backgrounds, but similar experiences. We just had different jobs, different places of employment. I would say different pay, but everybody, to the most part, American-wise, had some type of good pay. It was just everybody else that was questionable. Not really sure how to, I guess, I don't think there was a big difference. Let me just put it like that.
Okay, that's fair enough.
I think being a civilian, when I first got there, I could kind of hang out with people and hang out with everybody. But because I worked at lodging and I had like 143 employees, I'm trying to think of your question. So I really couldn't hang out with my employees because then I was overseeing the entire organization. So I didn't, I had to carry myself a certain way. And so a lot of things that I did was just with these ladies. And so, like Ashley said, we were just kind of together. And let me make sure I'm answering this right. So yeah, so as a civilian, that was kind of my lifestyle. So because I was in a management position and I had people that worked under me, it was very difficult to really hang out or do things out in public all the time because you would see the same people every day. The people that I worked with or the people that worked under me, I would see them out at the bars. I would see them out at the restaurants. I would see them kind of everywhere. And you're always working. That's one thing about Gitmo as a civilian, as a military person. Even though you're off work, we were always working every time we went somewhere. People, would still ask you questions. People are still trying to talk to you. And, so that lifestyle part was kind of different.
I would just add that one of the biggest differences that I noticed was because I moved around so often, one of the things that always just kind of stood out to me is that with the military, there's kind of this internal brotherhood. So when they go from one place to the next, it's like this built-in support network that's there, and there's a lot of familiarity there and things like that. I'm not saying that there's not still an adjustment period, but they have things actually in place to support them in terms of their acclimation to the new location and things like that. As a civilian, specifically as a contractor, because I wasn't even like a GS employee or anything, like I was a straight up outsider, like a contractor. And so for me, it was difficult moving from one place to the next because every time you go to a new place, you have to find your footing. You have to, navigate the space. Sometimes most places, we didn't even have an office. So you would have to find somewhere to meet with clients. You would have to find somewhere to pull new clients, to do outreach and things like that. So for me, that was probably the biggest difference is that as a civilian contractor, a lot of times I just felt like I was on my own and I had to figure it out on my own. Whereas, with a GS employee or with the military personnel, they kind of have these built-in systems.
This is Desiree. I was going to say, it's not really, for me, the civilian or military part of it all. It was the job that we had. So Karissa, Roshuanda, and I, we worked at the Child Development Center. And at the time, we were in a lower management position. So we tried to conduct ourselves in a certain way. So it's like, going certain places, doing certain things. You didn't want to do too much because, you're partying with the parents. So you have to maintain a certain level of I guess, respect. So it was just difficult sometimes being able to let your hair down and have fun out in public without being judged like, oh, that's the woman that's taking care of my kids and she's out there dropping like it's hot. So I think that's another reason why we had our house parties or had our Sunday dinners, so we were able to, let our hair down, be crazy, have fun without having to look over our shoulder to see who's watching us or seeing if we're being judged.
So to kind of piggyback off of what Latrice said about her being a contractor as opposed to being a civilian, for me, this is Karissa. For me, I was reached out to, like Desiree and Roshuanda both reached out to me before I even got to Gitmo. Like they knew I was coming, and we didn't even know Latrice was coming until she walked into the building, and we're like, "Oh, who is that?" And we were all excited. But so we did have that kind of support system built in, before I even got there. So that was a really great thing to have too.
I would like to add something now that's, I guess, I got a little bit more clarification or what have you. The brotherhood part about the military, it is true. As much as I would like to deny it, it's true. But what the military doesn't teach you is how to make, like I said, long-lasting friendships, because a lot of people, it's kind of like a pump and dump. You get there, they take care of you, then you're set in place with these systems, but then it's like, okay, what are you going to do with it next? How are you going to continue to make your duty station here, your time at your duty station, portable to you? Because once you leave work, there's a lot of people that don't talk to you when you leave work. And for me, I had the type of, I guess, hairstyle to where I didn't look like I was in the military when I came home and I took off my uniform. So I would mingle in and kind of blend in a little bit with everybody else, not anyone understand, okay, she's in the military, there's a difference. We know she's in the military, but we kind of don't recognize her when she's not in her uniform. It might be a little bit of a difference, but not too much.
I did have, okay. When you were talking, somebody was talking previously about sort of the I don't know what the proper term is, but that lack of division between public life and private life. I think that is something when people move abroad that I know it's one of the things that caught me off guard, because again, as a teacher, and being in the US, there's a certain amount of distance I expect between my personal life and parents, and all of that kind of went out the window moving abroad. Did you experience that when you lived other places than Guantanamo, and how did you navigate that?
Well, it's this is Desiree. That was I said that it's the same overseas because again, you're in a community where there's not many Black people. Well, in Cuba there was, but other places I would say, like in Japan, there's not that many Black people that I knew that worked at the center or whatever. So sometimes you do develop friendships with the parents, and you just have to kind of be choosy who you do befriend, because again, I'm your child's teacher technically, so I have to maintain a certain level of professionalism, but I'm a real person too. So in Cuba, it was easy because, like I said, Ashley and Ebony, they both had children that went to the CDC. We formed those friendships, and I do believe they accept me for me, my crazy self. And I didn't feel any type of way to be myself around them. But it's kind of difficult maintaining the professionalism / friendship. So leaving Gitmo, I kind of strayed away from that, and I tried to find people that wasn't part of the CDC, which again is difficult because that's where you are all the time. So that's how you would meet people. So it's just really kind of difficult to navigate personally.
Yeah, and just to kind of add to that, I think it really requires you have to put up some walls. You have to maintain really strong boundaries. At least for me, I had to maintain really strong boundaries, but it's like a balancing act, because on the one hand you want to be friendly and things, because you got a job to do and you want to be social in that way, to be more effective in your job. But at the same time, you want to be able to live your life outside of that job. And so I think in a place like Gitmo, it is really difficult to have that separation because it's so small and there's only like a handful of places that you can go, and so it's you're running into the kids, you're running into the families, you're running into the administrators. You can't really get away from it. But when I was in Japan or when I was in Okinawa, it was a little easier because I was able to kind of isolate myself a little bit more, because there I didn't have to. I had more than one grocery store to choose from, so I can go to a grocery store 2 or 3 miles away, which is a little bit further of a drive, but then I can just be myself. I don't have to worry about running into anybody. And I want to just highlight that we all, our abroad experience was around military bases, but there's a lot of people that are abroad outside of the military experience. I do online counseling, and I have a client that's in Japan right now. She's in Misawa, and she's not connected to any kind of military base or anything. She's teaching English in a Japanese school. And so for her, it's not so much an issue of running into her kids, or the students that she works with, because she's not on the military base, but making connection with other coworkers and other teachers and administrators and things like that. So it's kind of like the opposite for her, where she's actually leaning into those relationships so that she can have some level or some sort of familiarity. So, you know, our experience has been around military bases, but that's not the only way to live abroad. And people who live abroad in other ways may not necessarily find it as difficult.
So I can add to that point because I did have experiences that are not related to the military. This is Karissa. Um, I was in Ireland, just living in Ireland, working. There were no other American people in my building where I worked. I didn't work with kids, so it was really it was kind of like almost an isolating experience, especially coming from Japan and the military base where you have those connections with people that work with you or live on the base or live near the base. I didn't have that in Ireland. And then I also was in Kuala Lumpur last year, and there was a larger American expat community, so I was able to make connections with people, but I didn't live near where I worked, not even in the same city. So it was a lot easier for me to separate my personal life from my professional life. Whereas with the military community, it's a little bit more, it's kind of more meshed together just because of the nature of where you are.
And so let me ask about repatriation. You know, some people move abroad with the intent never to come back. I am one of those people. I just the other day, somebody asked about like, oh, because of the global pandemic, are you going back to your home country? And I was like, it's going to take a whole lot more than a global pandemic to make me go back. Some of you have repatriated, and some of you have not. Was the repatriation planned? How has that been? For those that haven't yet, are you planning to, or is that not necessarily one of your goals?
Within my overseas experience, I did go back to the States for a year, and it was something planned. It was strategic because where I was, I needed to get back to the States to be there for a year in order to be able to qualify for overseas jobs. So do I have a plan of going back someday when I want to plant my feet and settle down? But as of right now, if I could spend the rest of my life overseas, I would.
This is Ebony. I did not necessarily want to move back to the States, but at the time in my life, it was a time that I needed to um, move back. Um, I don't plan on staying here or making any footprints here really anytime soon. Like, I'm really anxious to get back overseas because honestly, to me, um, living the American dream. There's so many other dreams out here or other countries that I would love to explore and go to that are a lot better than here, I would say. So I'm working my way right now as I finish up my year here in Texas as looking to other jobs so I can get back overseas as fast as possible because my son, we love the beach, we love the water, we love the sun. Cuba has spoiled me where I don't want to experience winter. But now that it's just me and my son, we are ready to move and groove.
This is Latrice. For me, my repatriation was definitely planned, and it was something that I had been ready to do for a while, but mostly because I think of my job circumstances. My job was an unaccompanied position. So, like I said, I met my husband the first time I left the country, and we got married. I came back to the States. I did a year in Texas and when we first got married, and then I went back to doing the international assignments because the money is better. And so for me, it was really more, it wasn't so much about wanting to come back to the States so much as it was just needing to be a wife and kind of move into this next chapter of my life and settle down. I think if my job was like, Desiree and Roshuanda and Karissa, where they can, and Ebony, like where they can actually take their families with them, if that position was accompanied, then I would still be doing international assignments. I would not have chosen to come back to the States. And it's this adjustment. I got back stateside on November 12th of last year. So I've been back not quite 6 months yet, I think, or maybe just right over 6 months, which is like literally the longest amount of time that me and my husband have spent in the same place, in the same country at one time. And so the adjustment has been good because I was intentional about finding a job and things like that, and like making myself a part of this community and things like that. But it's also been difficult because I've had quite a few experiences since I've been back that I call, like my welcome to America experiences of racism and dealing with microaggressions and things like that, like things that I haven't had to really deal with on this scale while I was gone, and like the whole political climate and just all of those different kinds of things. So I'm definitely happy to be home because I'm happy to be with my husband and to be a wife and to kind of just plant myself a little bit and stabilize myself. But if the opportunity presented itself to go abroad again with my husband where I could stabilize in another country, then I definitely would take that opportunity.
Actually speaking, I would have to say repatriatism or repatriating yourself. In the military, you have a choice, but then you kind of don't have a choice. I would have loved to stay in Gitmo. I love being overseas, but the fact of having a family, it kind of, I wouldn't say, and I'm not going to say they ground you because they honestly do. They ground you. And I have children. My daughter's dad, my ex-husband, he worked with me very well while I was in Cuba. So I kind of made the decision purposefully, like, okay, you know what, since he worked so well with me when it came down to custody, when it came down to visitation and things like that, I want to at least come to the States to make the burden less on them, him and his wife and everything. And I've been sitting here since, I believe, 2017. And with the political climate, let's talk about that for a moment. I'm ready to go back. I've never wanted to be in the States longer than enough time for me to hug my mom, kiss her on the cheek, hug my sister, and then leave. But because I have a family and because they have different dads and because they're fostering those relationships and nurturing those relationships, I have to kind of take one for the team and be in the States. But if there was another way, I guess, to make sure that I'm not going to get deployed, because the opportunity did come, and it was the fact of me having to choose to be in North Carolina versus going over to Okinawa, because there was a potential for me to be deployed. I had to still choose them first. But if the opportunity arose where I wasn't deployed and I could plant myself and not have to worry about any of those things, I would love it and I would stay forever.
This is Desiree. So for me, I went back to the States for a year. I went to San Diego, and I enjoyed it, but it was just way too expensive. And like they said about the political climate and the racism, and then just the different things that you have to worry about while being in America that you don't necessarily worry about overseas, it's unsettling. So it's kind of like it's supposed to be the greatest country in the world, but yet not really. So I love being overseas. I would love to stay overseas, but my parents are getting older. Nieces and nephews are getting older. My whole family is spread out. So I'm just kind of torn with wanting to be with them, but yet still live my life for my family and I.
And this is Karissa. So I was overseas for 10 years, and it's always been just the way that I live my life, just moving around and living overseas and all of that kind of stuff. But I came to like a natural transition point last year at the end of my contract in Malaysia, and I wanted my son to know my parents. So we moved to where they live in Colorado. As he gets older, probably in the next 2 years, we will definitely be transitioning back overseas. Something that concerns me, like 3 of us on this call, we have sons. So it's always in the back of my head that, you know, Black men are getting targeted here. So I just want to make sure that he's in a safe environment, and I just feel safer overseas.
I completely understand and agree with you ladies on that. Thank you all for agreeing to chat with me and sharing your friendship and sharing your experiences. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it and how valuable this is to hear from Black women who are out there living this life, have lived this life, have, had different experiences. So I just want y'all to know how much I appreciate it. If you've got a Facebook group, a blog, YouTube channel, whatever that is, if you want people to come and interact with you and or buy your merch, whatever, feel free to mention that.
This is Latrice. I do have a Facebook group called Trust Village. It is a safe space for healing and manifestation. And we are a group of Black women who are all on a journey of healing and manifestation. So we all are at different points in our journey, but we're on that journey together. And so I teach the skills and things that are necessary in order to move through that journey and get to that place of healing, whatever that means for each individual person. So that's a free Facebook group called Trust Village. I also host a podcast called Unicorns Talk Podcast, and it's a weekly girl talk about Black women, our healing and manifestation, and that can be found across all platforms, all streaming platforms. And I love making Unicorns Talk, and it's really an opportunity for me to share my journey, and a part of that journey, pretty much my entire abroad experience was captured in my podcast. So if anybody wants to get more information about that, they can go to my website, latricesampsonrichards.com, and you'll be able to find my podcast. I do a vlog, and any information about how to work with me there.
So, how do you build community? How do you make genuine connections with other people? I am no expert, but what I am is incredibly socially awkward. So if I can do this, probably anybody can. my number one suggestion would be to put yourself in places to do the things that you like to do, or to cross paths with other people who like to do those things that you like to do. You will find your people doing the shit that you like to do, or the stuff that you always wanted to do. So if you want to learn pottery, take a pottery class, because guess who else is going to be in there? A bunch of people who want to know how to make pottery. Okay. I'm not going to tell you to do like this big 180 shift on your life and, push your boundaries and go out and try new things. Because if those are things that you have never had any interest in doing, the people who do those things are probably not your people. Okay. As introverted as I am, I obviously do not do small talk. I do not talk to strangers unless under the pain of death. And even then, it's a little iffy. I am not going to start a conversation with some rando. Okay. I do not get down like that. But I will speak to people that I don't know in an online environment. So it is totally acceptable to socialize digitally. So you can physically go out and do those things that you want to do, those activities you want to have in your life, or you can connect with other people who do those things or who are interested in those things and do it online. You might actually find like it's easier to do that beginning get to know you stuff in a digital environment than it is face to face. My second piece of advice is to be open to the unexpected. And what I mean by that is your people may not come in the package you expect. And so don't discount someone because they're older, they're younger, they're straight, they're gay, whatever. A lot of us by default have an expectation that our community is going to be a mirror, and it might not. Okay. So you don't want to discount somebody before you can really figure out, are they part of your tribe or not? So be unexpected. You might like knitting, and you might meet somebody who is like, doesn't look like the stereotypical knitter, but they might be a badass with yarn and you never gave them a chance. So I'm just saying, be open to the unexpected. And then my last piece of advice, and this is very simple, be yourself, or the version of yourself that you have never been free to be before. The right people will find you, okay? Be who you are, or you now find yourself at a place in life where you're re-evaluating who you've been thus far and you want to make some changes. Make those changes. Be the new you if that's who you want to be. And when you live that life, you are going to attract the people who are supposed to be there, and give yourself the opportunity to make those connections that can then develop into something deeper. Okay. It will take time, but you can make new friends that will eventually develop into community over time. Thank you for listening. Be sure to check out the show notes for more information on Latrice's Facebook group, as well as resources for finding civilian jobs on Army bases or with the State Department. Thank you, for your support of this podcast. My life has been a little crazy lately, which is why this episode is late in getting posted. I apologize for that. I appreciate every single review, every email, every DM that you all have sent, and letting me know that, you support what I'm trying to do here. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast or left a review, please consider doing so. Your reviews help with SEO. They help other women find the show, benefit from it. Also, special shout out to everybody who's sharing the podcast, retweeting it or sharing it on Facebook. I see y'all. I appreciate y'all. If you are interested in supporting the podcast with a small financial contribution, and when I say small, I mean like $1 a month small, you can do that using the link in the description. And that's all I got for this week. Thanks again, y'all, and I will talk to you soon.